Before the world hears your voice, let heaven hear your cry. That is the heart of the first keynote. In Psalm 142, David doesn't open with strategy or praise. He opens with desperation. I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. That choice to cry out is intentional. He isn't whispering inward thoughts or holding in the pain. He's lifting his voice. That action alone holds deep spiritual weight. It is not a casual mention or silent prayer. It is vocal, passionate, vulnerable, and real. It is an example of how to approach God when the soul is heavy before the day even begins. Most people, when they wake up, are instantly pulled into the demands of the world. The phone buzzes, the to-do list appears. The concerns about money, work, relationships, or health start to whisper, then shout, and many instinctively run to people, seeking validation, comfort, or distraction. Others keep it inside, pretending to be okay, masking fear with activity. But Psalm 142 teaches us a different rhythm. It says, before you engage with anything or anyone, let your voice rise to God. Cry out. Don't wait until the pressure becomes unbearable. Don't wait until the anxiety grows louder than your faith. Begin your day by engaging with the only one who can handle what's really on your heart. David didn't cry out to the men who were with him. He didn't cry to the people who failed him. He cried to God because he knew that people could not carry the weight he was feeling. In fact, he said, "Look and see, there is no one at my right hand, no one is concerned for me. I have no refuge, no one cares for my life." That line is heartbreaking, but also deeply revealing. Even in the presence of others, David felt alone. That shows us that loneliness is not always about being physically alone. It's about feeling unseen in your suffering. And instead of spiraling in silence, David lifted his voice. This act of crying out to God in the morning is not weakness. It is wisdom. It's not an emotional outburst, it's a spiritual discipline. When you wake up and pour out your soul to God first, you're saying, "Lord, before I touch anything else, I need you." That cry doesn't need to be poetic or perfect. It just needs to be honest. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, not the rehearsed. He responds to realness, not performance. When your day begins with a cry to God, you realign your priorities. You acknowledge your need. And that surrender invites God to take the lead. There is a sacred power in starting your day with a cry rather than a complaint. Complaints go in circles, but cries go upward. Complaints drain you, but cries draw the spirit close. When David lifted his voice, he wasn't just venting, he was surrendering. That cry is the sound of trust. It says, "God, I can't carry this, but I believe you can." That simple act of vocal surrender changes everything. The atmosphere in your room shifts, the weight on your shoulders begins to lift, the anxiety loses its grip, because when your voice reaches heaven, heaven responds with presence. So the next time you wake up and feel overwhelmed, don't start by talking to your fear. Don't start by telling everyone else what's wrong. Cry aloud to the Lord, speak to Him first. Let your tears, your doubts, your frustrations come out in His presence. He will not reject you. He will receive your cry and begin the healing work that only He can do. Before the world can shape your thoughts, let God shape your spirit. That's how battles are won before the day even begins. That's how peace enters before the problem even changes. That's why your first cry matters. David didn't pray with polished words or rehearsed praise. He prayed with raw honesty. That is what makes Psalm 142 so powerful. It reminds us that God does not respond to performance. He responds to truth. When David said, "I pour out before Him my complaint, before Him I tell my trouble," he was not pretending. He wasn't trying to impress God with religious language. He simply opened his heart and let the truth flow out. That is where real transformation begins. God is not looking for us to hide behind spiritual cliches. He is looking for our authentic voice. So many people approach prayer like a stage performance, believing they must come to God with the right phrases, the correct posture, the proper theology. But David, a man after God's own heart, shows us something entirely different. He didn't start with praise or promises. He started with a complaint. That might sound strange to some, even disrespectful. But it wasn't. It was reverent honesty. God would rather hear your confusion and heartbreak than a scripted sentence you don't mean. David's boldness in being vulnerable tells us something vital. God is not offended by your pain. He's drawn to it. When we pray with honesty, we stop filtering our hearts and start pouring them out. And that kind of prayer doesn't just reach God, it transforms us, because in the process of saying what's real, the hidden weight of your soul is released. The moment you stop hiding in prayer is the moment healing begins. Telling God your trouble isn't a sign of weakness. It's a declaration of relationship. It means you trust Him enough to tell Him what you're scared to tell others. That's the kind of prayer life that moves mountains. It's not always clean. Sometimes it comes with tears. Sometimes it comes with questions. But every word spoken in truth is a step deeper into God's presence. Many Christians wonder why their prayers feel dry or lifeless. Often it's because they are praying like someone else, or praying what they think they should say, rather than what they need to say. But David wasn't concerned with sounding spiritual. He was desperate to survive. That kind of desperation strips away religion and gives birth to intimacy, and it's in that honest space that God meets us. That's why Psalm 142 isn't just a passage to read, it's a model to follow. Start your day not with polished prayers, but with honest ones. Say what's really in your heart, and you'll feel heaven draw near. There's also something deeply comforting in knowing that when your spirit feels faint, God doesn't walk away. He watches closely. David said, "When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way." That single verse dismantles the fear that God leaves when we are at our lowest. Quite the opposite. He leans in. When your strength is gone and your prayers turn into groans, God does not retreat. He remains, He watches, He understands, and not only does He see where you are, but He also sees the path ahead of you. You may wake up some mornings and feel like you can't go on. You might feel directionless, confused, overwhelmed, or just emotionally numb. But Psalm 142 reminds us that even when your spirit is faint, your Father is not far. He watches over your way. That means He sees every hidden fear, every invisible battle, every silent cry. You are not forgotten. You are not walking alone. And even if you don't have the strength to take the next step, He does. That watchfulness is not distant. It's intimate. It's the gaze of a shepherd who guards his sheep even when they can't see the danger ahead. You don't need to have it all together to approach God. You just need to be real. If all you can say is, "Lord, I don't know what to do," then say that. If all you can offer is your silence and your tears, that's enough. Because the God who watches over your way doesn't need a performance. He wants your heart, and when you give it to Him in its truest form, you will find His presence rushing in like a flood, not to judge you, but to carry you. In the shadows of isolation, where the world feels distant and the noise fades into silence, God begins His greatest work. That's what Psalm 142 shows us through the life of David. It's easy to think that the cave represents defeat, a place of hiding or failure, but in God's plan, the cave is a classroom. It's where kings are shaped before they ever sit on a throne. David wasn't in the palace when he wrote this psalm. He was hiding in a dark cave, running for his life, cut off from comfort, misunderstood, and alone. And yet, in that very place, he developed the heart of a warrior, a worshiper, and a leader. We often despise the caves in our lives, seasons of loneliness, obscurity, rejection, or heartbreak. We ask, God, where are you? Why am I here? But what we don't realize is that the cave is not just a prison, it's a preparation ground. Before God brings you into public purpose, He often hides you in private surrender. He strips away distractions. He removes the applause. He isolates you from people's opinions, not to hurt you, but to shape you. In the silence of the cave, your identity is not built on performance. It's built on presence. It's where you learn that God alone is your strength and song. David was called, anointed, and chosen long before he was crowned king. But God didn't rush him to the throne. He allowed him to be hunted. He allowed him to be misunderstood. He allowed him to sit in a cave and cry out, because in that process, God was carving the kind of heart that could carry the weight of leadership without being destroyed by it. And if David had skipped the cave, he wouldn't have had the character to handle the crown. That's a truth every believer must hold on to. If you're in a cave season, it doesn't mean you're off track. It might mean you're right where God wants you to be. And it's in that place, still hidden, still hurting, that David does something radical. He declares, "You are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living." He doesn't wait until he's rescued to worship. He doesn't wait for the throne to call God good. Right there, in the middle of the cave, surrounded by fear, he makes a choice to see God as his portion. That's more than just positive thinking. That's faith. That's surrender. That's spiritual maturity. David could have looked around and said, "All I have is darkness." But instead he said, "All I have is God." And that's enough. When you make that kind of declaration in your dark place, it shatters the power of fear. It silences the lie that you need more than God to be secure. The truth is, when you can say, "God is my portion," while you're still waiting, still grieving, still hurting, then nothing the enemy throws at you can steal your peace. That's what God is trying to build in you during the cave seasons. Not just patience, but unshakable trust. A trust that says, even if I lose everything, I still have the one who holds everything. When you wake up in the morning and your circumstances haven't changed, say it anyway, "God, you are my portion." When you feel isolated or overlooked, say it, "God, you are enough for me." When your prayers haven't been answered yet, say it, "Lord, I choose to find my security in you." Because that declaration doesn't just change your mood, it changes your atmosphere. It opens the door for heaven's peace to flood your cave. It reminds the darkness who's still in control, and it recenters your soul on what truly matters. The cave is not forever, but what you build in the cave will last forever. God is not punishing you by hiding you. He's preparing you, and if you can worship in the darkness, you'll walk in victory when the light returns. Because the presence of God in the cave is the same presence that will carry you to the throne. And if He's your portion in hiding, He'll be your strength in victory. Psalm 142 is not just a cry for help. It is a spiritual weapon against the very thing that tries to suffocate us each morning, anxiety. When David cried aloud to the Lord and poured out his complaints, he wasn't just venting, he was resisting the pull of fear and dread that threatened to take over his mind. That's what anxiety does, it creeps in early. Before the day even begins, it whispers lies. It tells you that you're not enough, that everything will go wrong, that you're behind, that the pressure will crush you. But David's example teaches us how to fight back, not by pretending everything is okay, but by inviting God into the truth of how we feel. There is a sacred strength in waking up and going straight to God with your burdens instead of letting your mind run wild with worry. David didn't wait until midday. He didn't wait until someone encouraged him. He started with God, and that's what Psalm 142 invites us to do every single morning. It shows us how to take what's heavy and put it in God's hands before we carry it into the world. Anxiety thrives in silence, but it loses power when you bring it to the surface in the presence of God. That's what makes this psalm so practical. It teaches us to pray not when we feel strong, but when we feel weak. And the prayer doesn't have to be fancy, it just has to be real. That is the strategy David used. His spirit was faint, his path was hidden, and he was surrounded by enemies, but he didn't keep it in. He cried out loud. That's the first line of defense. If you can train your spirit to turn to God the moment anxiety rises, you are building a wall against spiritual defeat. Anxiety wants you to sit in silence and spin in your thoughts. But this psalm tells you to speak, to cry out, to release your thoughts upward before they spiral inward. The reason Psalm 142 is so powerful in the morning is because it resets the direction of your heart. Anxiety points inward. It makes you look at what you lack, what you fear, and what you cannot control. But prayer points upward. It reminds you who is really in charge, who goes before you, and who already has a plan for the day. When David says, "You are my refuge," he's not talking about a building or a hiding place. He's talking about a person. God himself becomes the safe place where you can release what's tormenting you. There's a battle for your mind happening every day, and the outcome of that battle often depends on how you begin. If you start with worry, it grows. But if you start with even worship, through tears it shrinks. That's why the enemy doesn't want you to pray in the morning. That's why distractions multiply and discouragement shows up before your feet hit the floor. Because the enemy knows that if you begin your day in Psalm 142 posture, crying out to God and declaring him your portion, he can't win that day. Your mind becomes guarded, your heart becomes focused, your spirit becomes steady. Psalm 142 is not just a psalmist's armor, and every morning you choose to wear it, you are making a statement. Today, fear will not lead me, God will. You are refusing to carry burdens that aren't yours to carry. You are reminding your soul that even if nothing goes as planned, you are not walking alone. God is your refuge, your portion, and your protector, and anxiety has no power over a heart that is surrendered. So tomorrow when you wake up, before you reach for your phone, before you check the news, before you respond to stress, open your mouth and pray like David. Start your day with Psalm 142. Let your voice be lifted above the noise. Let heaven hear you before fear does. That one decision will change not just your morning, but your entire life. David said something radical in Psalm 142 that most people would never dare to say out loud. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. That's not a poetic exaggeration. That's a man at his emotional breaking point. He felt forgotten, abandoned, invisible. And the beauty of this moment is that David didn't hide that feeling from God. He brought it to him with full transparency. Most of us are taught to cover up feelings of rejection and loneliness. We're told to stay strong, push forward, act like it doesn't hurt. But David chose something much braver. He exposed the ache in his heart to the only one who could heal it. And in doing so, he revealed a truth every believer must hold on to. Even when people forget you, God remembers you. Loneliness has a way of convincing us that our pain is insignificant. It whispers that nobody sees, nobody hears, nobody cares. But Psalm 142 pulls back that lie and shows us the divine reality, that in the silence, in the cave, in the moment when you feel most alone, you are still fully known. David looked around and saw no man standing with him. But instead of collapsing under the weight of abandonment, he lifted his eyes to God and said, I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge. When earthly support disappears, heavenly presence becomes more real than ever. That's the secret weapon of the believer. We are never truly alone, even when it feels like we are. So many people live their lives waiting to be validated by others, waiting for a call, a message, a sign of appreciation. And when that doesn't come, discouragement sets in like a storm. But David's prayer flips the narrative. He doesn't wait for people to show up. He runs to the one who's already there. That shift in focus is what makes the difference. Because people are limited, they may forget, misunderstand, or even abandon you, but God, He sees every tear, He counts every sigh, He stores every prayer. He is not like man. He does not leave when the spotlight fades. In fact, He draws closer. The cry of Psalm 142 is not just a lament. It is a declaration of God's nearness. David wasn't rescued yet. He wasn't delivered yet, but still he prayed, still he believed, still he said, set me free from my prison that I may praise your name. That statement alone is proof that David knew something deeper, that his current isolation wasn't his final destination, and that's what God wants you to see too. Just because people don't understand your pain doesn't mean God is silent. Just because you're not surrounded by friends doesn't mean you're forsaken. In fact, the absence of people often makes space for the presence of God to be felt more personally than ever before. There's a unique intimacy that is formed in seasons of loneliness. It is in those quiet, tear-filled moments that you stop performing and start abiding. It's where real trust is built, not trust in outcomes, but trust in God's character. David didn't need a crowd to believe. He didn't need applause to worship. All he needed was the confidence that God was listening, and that kind of relationship changes everything. Because when you realize God is enough, the fear of being alone loses its grip. So if today you feel forgotten by people, don't let it define you. Use it as an invitation. Go deeper into God. Tell Him the truth. Let the ache in your heart lead you to the one who formed it. He doesn't just tolerate your emotions. He invites them. He wants your real voice, your honest questions, your fragile moments, and He will meet you there, not with judgment, but with presence. David left the cave with a strength no man could give him. That same strength is available to you. Not after the storm, but right in the middle of it. When David ended Psalm 142 by saying, "The righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me," he was still in the cave. He was still isolated. He was still in distress, and yet he spoke of a future he hadn't seen yet. That's the power of faith, declaring restoration before it arrives, praising God for deliverance while still surrounded by trouble. David believed something deeply, that God's goodness was not just a past memory or a distant hope, but an active force working in his life even in the darkest moments, and that belief allowed him to speak life into what looked like a dead situation. This is a powerful truth for anyone who feels surrounded by despair. When your present feels like a prison, the enemy will try to convince you that your future is already sealed in darkness. But David shows us something different. He teaches us how to use our words to frame a different future, one shaped not by fear, but by faith. He says, "I will be surrounded by the righteous." That's not just wishful thinking, that's prophetic vision. It's the kind of faith that says, I don't need to see the crowd to believe the celebration is coming. I don't need to be rescued yet to praise the rescuer. Sometimes we think we have to wait until everything is fixed before we worship, before we speak hope. But David flips that idea. He proclaims joy before the chains fall off. He anticipates restoration before it happens. Why? Because his confidence isn't in what he sees, it's in who God is. Because of your goodness to me, he says, not because of my strategy, my strength, or my support system. Not because of my resources or my reputation, but because of your goodness, God. That's the source. That's the anchor. That's the reason I can speak life while I'm still in lack. And this goodness of God is not passive. It's not just a warm thought or a